Centuries after the fall of the Second Empire, savage nations and petty tribes competed for dwindling resources across the vast post-apocalyptic wasteland. Yet while some, born around the fall of Bast, sought to join larger factions in the hopes they might offer a measure of security and stability, others formed independent alliances, guilds, cults, and bandit crews, settling their own territories where they struggled to provide food, water, and security, but could live by their own laws and philosophies without the oppressive threat of government soldiers hanging overhead. Possibly founded during the years of the Second Empire, Deadcat was a growing human faction with settlements in the far north of the continent. As even the name of their realm may have been chosen as an insult to cat-lon, the tyrannical skeleton robot leader of the Second Empire, Deadcat was considered a home for rebels and the descendants of rebels who wished to be free from the wars and politics of the South. Although they were once a relatively strong nation, able to survive the fall of the Second Empire and wars that followed, they struggled to defend against constant cannibal attacks, as the Painted Tribes expanded to conquer much of the north, eventually capturing the city of Deadcat and turning it into their capital, forcing fleeing survivors east and south to live in small, remote fishing villages where they established whatever defenses they could and gained a wary attitude toward outsiders. A mixed population of humans that included Greenlanders and Scorchlanders, Deadcat formed an alliance with the Flotsam Ninjas of the Hidden Forest, as both were enemies of the cannibals trying to overrun their territories. Becoming a decentralized nation of distant fishing villages, by the fall of Bast, the people of Deadcat lived along the shores of the northern coast and Dreg. Not far from the northern remnants of Deadcat was another independent faction that suffered a tragic fate from relentless cannibal attacks. Thought of as the beginnings of a megacity and new empire, the settlement was suddenly and entirely abandoned, leaving only a ghost village in the northern coast on the border with the Cannibal Plains. Seeking to escape the oppressive governments of the Holy Nation and United Cities Empire, a group of settlers made their way north to found a village in an ideal location, surrounded by hills to block the wind and close to water for fishing. They built walls, buildings, and set up turrets for defense, believing that would be enough to deal with the mindless cannibals roaming nearby, but it was not, and slowly settlers started disappearing, either fleeing from fear or losing their lives to cannibal attacks. At some point, the rest of the population suddenly vanished, perhaps fleeing from an attack or simply abandoning the village. But whatever the case, their departure was so hasty, they did not pack many of their belongings, leaving plenty of supplies out in the open, available for passing adventurers seeking respite from the dangers of these lands. An independent city founded in the dangerous Foglands, Mongrel became a safe haven for all those lost within the mists covering the territory, providing a measure of safety and security against the endless hordes of mad Hiver fogmen that attacked any traveler they encountered. A home to Shinobi Thieves, mercenaries, adventurers, exiles, and criminals escaping the law, the population of Mongrel was cut off from the rest of the continent, and so had no choice but to establish their own economy, with plenty of workshops, bars, machines, and tools for production. Yet many fear for the future of this settlement, as most of those within could not leave or engage in trade, meaning their food reserves will eventually run out. A guild of ninjas and assassins, the Shinobi Thieves were a faction of criminals able to maintain decent relations with both major and minor powers, operating openly in the bars and towers of many settlements across the continent. To join their ranks, all they required was a one-time payment of 10,000 cats, which in turn granted access to beds, training equipment, plastic surgeons, and fences to buy or sell stolen goods at discounted prices. Once accepted into their ranks, they watched each other's backs, always defending a comrade when in trouble or providing medical care after a fight. Given their wide-reaching influence, the guild was one of the strongest minor factions on the continent, but even so, could not stand up to larger powers like the United Cities or Holy Nation. Yet the thieves were so loyal to each other that should one of their members get into a fight with city guards or soldiers, they will all rush to join in, regardless of the odds or certainty of defeat. A small faction of stealthy warriors dedicated to commerce and profit, the Trade Ninjas operated bars and shops in the independent city of Morn, the ruins of the hub, and further north in the border zone. a largely neutral faction simply running and protecting their businesses. It is rumored that they may have secretly involved themselves in the war between the Holy Nation and Shek for their own benefit. At some point during the height of their war, the Shek came into possession of the hub, but suddenly and hastily abandoned the city, setting fire to the buildings and leaving it a ruin. Unsure why they departed, the Holy Nation sent scouts to see if the hub could be resettled, but many, including several priests, claimed they saw shadowy figures stalking them in the night. When soldiers started disappearing, the scouts were convinced the city was cursed, perhaps by the demon goddess Narco. As reconstruction of the hub would be costly, and an apparent threat haunted these ruins, the scouts retreated from the city and recommended against any further contact. With both the Shek and Holy Nation gone, the trade ninjas moved in to open shops inside and outside the hub. Found in the Shrieking Forest, Purple Sands, and Cannibal Plains, the Shrieking Bandits were a faction of malnourished humans who devolved to the point they lost the ability to speak normally, instead emitting seemingly incomprehensible screams and shrieks to communicate. Although they have been known to attack travelers, they maintain decent relations with the Nomads, who claim the Shrieking Bandits are not bad people and simply misunderstood, with some rumors stating wanderers could avoid fighting these groups if they simply engage in a dialogue and speak the right words. Eager to take advantage of the ever-present dangers in every corner of the continent, mercenary groups rose to earn coin through combat, working to protect caravans, adventurers, and traders, or else lend their experience to the battlefield, fighting for one of the many major and minor factions of Kenshi during their wars with rival states. Often found in bars or wandering city streets, mercenaries could be hired by anyone for personal or settlement protection, requiring only a one-time payment for a specific period of time, during which they provide their own weapons and armor. They also reserve the right to claim loot from defeated enemies. Oppositely to the mercenaries, paid to involve themselves in the affairs of others, the Nomads of Kenshi remained neutral to all, journeying peacefully across the continent while providing a valuable service to outsiders by herding and selling animals, including goats, bone dogs, pack bulls, and garu. Though most lived in temporary camps that could be moved at a moment's notice, some few Nomads settled semi-permanent villages in the territories of Shem and Dreg, opening shops for the sale of animals. Engaging in one of the most profitable businesses on the continent, manhunters, slave hunters, and slave traders all earn their cats from enslaving and selling intelligent living beings. In addition to enjoying lucrative relations with the Holy Nation and other slave trading factions, they maintained an especially strong alliance with the Traders Guild and United Cities, establishing a number of mining camps and settlements within United Cities territories. Although the continent of Kenshi was populated by many minor factions competing with their neighbors for resources, a unique stalemate existed in the swamps of the south, where outcasts, outlaws, exiles, adventurers, and criminals braved the many environmental dangers for the sake of settling in a land of freedom and fairness, where one might actually reap the rewards of hard work without nobles or priests taking it for themselves. Forming a decentralized faction that emphasized individualism, the Swampers controlled Shark, the territory's only city, as well as Mudtown and 2 small villages. A land teeming with vicious blood spiders and crop-eating river raptors, Swampers also enjoyed many benefits from the territory, including plenty of fresh water, fertile soil, and fishing for food. Yet the most lucrative opportunities came from farming hemp, which grew exceptionally well in the area and could be made into the narcotic hashish to be sold for enormous profits either illegally to the Shinobi Thieves in the United Cities Empire or legally to the tech hunters. A land of abundant resources with no governments or religious institutions to seal it away, the Swampers were not the only faction interested in the region, resulting in gangs of all sorts establishing a foothold in the territory. Without a central government or standing army to defend themselves, the Swampers were at risk of losing all they held, and so negotiated an agreement with the 5 most powerful gangs of the region, including the Hounds, Blackshifters, Grayflayers, Stone Rats, and Twinblades, to forge a peace agreement and loose alliance where they all agreed to share the territory, while keeping the city of Shark neutral to all. Each of the gangs would be allowed to continue operating as they saw fit, but would respect the peace and not interfere in the affairs of others. Profiting greatly from this alliance, each faction established their territory and businesses, but it was all built upon a very fragile peace between gangsters ultimately motivated by money and power, meaning that despite all they'd accomplished, the land might descend into warfare and violence in an instant over something as simple as a personal dispute or tavern brawl. The most powerful of all the swamp gangs, the Hounds held the greatest influence over Neutral Shark after establishing their headquarters in the city. Led by the Greenlander woman Big Grim, they also held the village of Rot and primarily produced hashish for sale in foreign markets. Always on the lookout for new recruits, adventurers could pay a set fee to Ears, a Hound diplomat found at the Dancing Skeleton Bar, for an introduction to Big Grim, who, after testing their loyalty and skills, might accept them as an ally. Led by Big Darkbrow, the Blackshifters were the next most powerful gang of the swamp, as they ran a casino in Shark and another in the Swamper settlement Mudtown. A faction of warrior hivers, they primarily earned cats through gambling, money lending, and extortion, though they also held a secret drug lab for the sale of hashish. One of the more respectable gangs of the swamp, the Grayflayers, led by Big Gray, made their money through raids, heists, and mercenary work, in addition to smuggling hashish. Running their crew out of the Grayflayers village and a smuggler's bar in Shem, rumors claimed this secretive gang adhered to a code of honor that demanded they only steal from those who deserved it. Oppositely, the Stone Rats were considered low-level thugs, earning cats by extorting business owners for protection money, all the while arrogantly strutting around Shark, picking fights with innocent travelers. Led by the Shek warrior Big Al from the Stone Rat village, their behavior was known to start brawls in the streets of Shark that could escalate rapidly, engulfing the entire city in violence. A Scorchlander gang with only a small presence in Mudtown, the Twinblades under Big Fang focused their efforts on kidnappings for ransom, yet they gained a far more disturbing reputation when it became known they kill and harvest the organs of those unable to pay. Transporting and selling these organs to the highest bidder, the Twinblades were also known to extort doctors and surgeons for more inventory. By entering into an agreement with the Swampers, the Hounds, Blackshifters, Grayflayers, Stone Rats, and Twinblades collectively controlled much of the swamp, yet they were not the only gangs who settled the region, as other, more minor, non-aligned factions had a presence as well. Led by the Red Saber boss from the Red Saber hideout, the Red Saber bandit crew roamed the territory, attacking and robbing passing travelers. Mortal enemies to the Swamp Ninjas, another non-aligned gang that patrolled the swamp, the two were known to attack each other on sight. Led by the Scorchlander woman Shade, the Swamp Ninja base was found just outside the territory in the South Wetlands. Lastly, there were the Band of Bones, a faction of Shek rebels led by the exiled warrior Tora the Fearless out of a small camp in the Sten Desert, northwest of the swamp. Strict adherents to the Shek culture of endless battle, the Band of Bones sent regular patrols into neighboring realms, where they attacked anyone they met, not only to rob them, but also for the thrill of battle. Among the various powers that held influence over the territories of Kenshi, some simply sought independence from larger governments or to practice their own philosophies more openly, while others started gangs or bandit crews with the specific intent to pursue criminality, at times out of sheer malice or an unwillingness to earn honest cats, but more often out of desperation, left with no choice but to steal and kill to survive. One of the more powerful, better equipped factions of the Border Zone territory, the Dust Bandits were a collection of thugs led by the Dust King, an infamous criminal with a 35,000 cat bounty wanted by the continent's three greatest powers, the United Cities, Holy Nation, and Shek Kingdom. Establishing their headquarters in Dust King Tower, their hierarchy placed the Dust King at the top, followed by various Dust Bosses who took charge over smaller crews of Dust Bandits and Dust Bandit Bowmen. These crews regularly patrolled the border zone, often setting up temporary camps throughout the territory. A relatively successful gang, Dust Bandits were decently armed and armored, wearing spiked helms, heart protector chest armor, armored rag skirts, and samurai boots. In order to pay for these luxuries, they primarily earned cats through extortion and protection rackets, demanding payment from passing travelers or those settling the region. Not far from Dust King Tower was the Tower of Ninjas, home to the Black Dragon Ninjas, the other major gang of the Border Zone, where they attacked and robbed passing travelers, or else demanded protection money from those settling the territory. For those unwilling to pay tribute, they could expect relentless hordes of Black Dragon Ganin sent to attack their settlements, killing or knocking out the population to take what they wanted. Rumored rivals to the elusive White Eyebrow clan, of who little is known, the Black Dragon Ninjas were led by the Scorchlander male Buzan and his lover, the Czech female Dimak, each wanted by the Holy Nation for a bounty of 20,000 cats. The final minor power of the border zone, the Starving Bandits or Hungry Bandits, were the largest of these gangs, with their people roaming far beyond the territory into Holy Nation lands like Okran's Gulf, Okran's Pride, and Okran's Valley, as well as Shem, Skinner's Rome, Dreg, and the northern coast. Yet they remained the weakest and least influential by far, as their crews were made up largely of escaped slaves and other desperate people on the verge of starvation who attacked passing travelers to steal food. Without any formal structure, crews were sometimes organized and held together by a starving bandit leader, but most were simply terrified people left with no other option but banditry, despite having little to no combat experience, wearing little to no armor, and wielding only the most basic weapons possible. As they did not act out of malice and had no larger goal or ambition aside from filling their bellies, they were sometimes willing to forego an attack in exchange for a donation of cats. Should an individual prove generous and regularly donate funds to help their people, they might even earn the respect and friendship of the gang, turning them into allies that offer aid in combat. One of the most fearless gangs on the continent, chasing death at every turn, the Black Desert Ninjas, or Cloud Ninjas, were skilled warriors that, in addition to patrolling the relatively safe Grey Desert, often roamed the Black Desert Deadlands and Iron Valley, where they attacked and robbed passing travelers, while suffering under constant environmental danger, including acid rain and poisonous gas clouds, preferring to suffer and die under these hostile conditions than abandon their territory for more hospitable locations. Skilled warriors operating out of the Cactus Den in Spine Canyon, the Sand Ninjas also patrolled the Eye and Great Desert, robbing passing travelers or else demanding protection money from nearby settlements. Led by Sand Ninja Oni, they were divided into regular Sand Ninjas and elite Sand Ninja Jonin. Taking their training so seriously, they held trials that involved sending members alone into the wasteland to fend for themselves and prove worthy of promotion. A territorial gang attacking anyone they deemed a threat within the Eye, Stormgap Coast, and Outlands. The Grass Pirates were relatively strong warriors with respectable martial arts skills, allowing them to prove a deadly threat even when unarmed. A decentralized faction of smaller groups led by straw lieutenants, Grass Pirates were well-known enemies of the United Cities Empire, often fighting their soldiers in the Stormgap Coast, but maintained decent relations with a preacher cult in the Eastlands of the same territory, with whom they peacefully coexisted. Highly skilled martial artists who wore no armor and fought with bare hands, the Gorrillo Bandits were based out of an old prison in the Bone Fields, while also patrolling Flats Lagoon, attacking and robbing passing travelers. Led by Gorrillo, the large, powerful warrior was an enemy to the Czech Kingdom and United Cities Empire, wanted for a sizable bounty of 50,000 cats. Possessing an exile plank, the same weapon wielded by Czech warriors, it is possible Gorrillo defeated the famous warrior Suchan the Ghost, causing his exile from the Czech Kingdom and founding of the Berserker rebels. Based out of the Black Dog HQ in the Outlands, the Black Dogs were a bandit crew that raised bone dogs for combat, sending their patrols into the Outlands, the Bone Fields, Flats Lagoon, the Grey Desert, and Stormgap Coast. Though they occasionally extorted money from those they encountered, for the most part, they left passing travelers alone, instead earning cats through protection money extracted from those who settled their territory. Patrolling Spine Canyon, the Grey Desert, and the Eye, Blood Raiders were sometimes called Blood Bandits, known to attack and rob anyone they encountered. A faction of skeleton bandits, the Thrall Masters were a gang of enslaved robots who attacked passing travelers under the orders of their free masters, Screamer the False and Punk from the Tower of Abuse in Venge. Though they also roamed the Grey Desert and Eye, they were largely protected from outside powers because their home territory of Venge was under constant attack during the daytime from deadly lasers, likely sent by a faulty orbiting satellite in space. This meant non-robots could suffer terrible wounds and die if they stayed in the area too long. Although the Thrall Masters attacked almost anyone who violated their territory, they peacefully coexisted with other robot factions in the region, including the Skeleton Legion, associated with the Second Empire exiles. In addition to the many minor factions, gangs, and bandit crews that roamed the continent of Kenshi, some fell under the sway of charismatic leaders, philosophies, or religious ideologies to form small but rabidly devoted cults that carved out territories to practice their beliefs. Roaming Green Beach, Stobe's Garden, the Crags, the Pits, and the Pits East, the Crab Raiders were a faction of Scorchlanders who worshipped crabs, domesticating and training them to serve as companions and combatants. Ruled by the Crab Queen from Crabtown in the Pits East, they also held 2 small villages further north. Populated by crabmen, crab patrons, crab smiths, crab barmen, Crab Raiders, and Crab Raider civilians. The Crab Raiders cult largely kept to themselves and were not immediately hostile to strangers, even allowing passing travelers to purchase crabs. Should anyone seek to settle their territory, they must first prove themselves worthy through a great crab tournament, fought over several rounds, in which the Crab Raiders attacked the opposing settlement to test their skills. Should the settlers survive and win the tournament, they would be accepted as allies, allowed to remain in the region and defended from outside enemies. Formidable warriors, donning unique crab armor, they were well-known enemies of the United Cities Empire, which placed a bounty of 40,000 cats upon their queen. Living in a highly disputed region of the continent, Crab Raiders were also enemies to other powers in the region, including the Reavers of Valamon out of Ark, a faction of rebel slavers seeking to overthrow and replace the United Cities nobility. Yet another enemy to the Crab Raiders, vying for control of the territory, the Skeleton Bandits were a cult of delusional humans, brainwashed into believing they were skeleton robots. Roaming Stobe's Gamble, Stobe's Garden, the Crags, and the Pits, they were known enemies to the United Cities and often battled the Crab Raiders, as well as the Reavers of Ark for control of these eastern lands. Divided into upgraded skeleton guards, upgraded skeleton bandits, and broken skeleton bandits, the cult was led from the Iron HQ by Elder, a real P4 unit robot skeleton who taught his followers a false history of the continent, claiming Stobe, an ancient behemoth robot, was a hero and martyr to their kind because he sacrificed his life to help exterminate the human race during the fall of the First Empire. Although the evidence, in fact, showed Stobe may have saved the last remnants of humanity, Elder instead twisted the story to make Stobe responsible for the violence and death. Possessing a deep personal hatred for humans, Elder started the Skeleton Bandits to inflict the ultimate revenge by not only convincing them to abandon their humanity, but then sending them off to kill others of their kind. As for the involvement of Stobe, it is possible Elder hated Stobe and for that reason changed his history, or else perhaps Elder admired Stobe for his heroism, but believed humanity was not worthy of his sacrifice, and so altered the story to make Stobe a hero to skeletons rather than humans. Convinced they were mechanical beings, the Skeleton Bandits strapped metal plates over their bodies and often spoke of their hatred for humans, even considering the Skeleton Legion as allies, though the robots of the South did not feel the same way, attacking them on sight. Not far from the Iron HQ were a cult of Skin Bandits, who were exact opposites to the Skeleton Bandits, as they were delusional robots, brainwashed into believing they were humans. Led by Savant, a possible genius scientist and doctor who studied robot psychology from the age of 10, this maniacal Scorchlander male convinced or possibly reprogrammed his followers to believe the madness inflicted upon many of the southern skeletons was caused by the ash constantly falling from the sky, which seeped into their mechanical parts. Therefore, his skeleton followers believed they could stave off this madness by transforming themselves into humans. This could be accomplished by capturing wayward human travelers, skinning them in peeler machines, and sewing their skins into clothing which then protected them from falling ash. Yet this skin armor degraded over time, and so there was a constant need for more forced donors, resulting in big skin harvest raids against any humans trying to settle the area. operating out of the Skin House HQ and 2 other skin houses in the sonorous Dark territory. Some have theorized their leader Savant may hold a grudge against the tech hunters, machinists, or humans in general, and for that reason spends his time with skeletons while targeting his own kind, or that despite preaching against the mad robots of the South, he is in fact a supporter and sympathizer to cat-lon and the Second Empire exiles of the Ashlands, causing him to set up his cult to block the entrance south, thereby protecting it from human scavengers and tech hunters who used to plunder the region as a resource for ancient tech. Perhaps it is for this reason the Skin Bandits considered the Skeleton Legion as welcome allies, despite the Legion not returning those feelings and attacking them on sight. Often battling other competing factions in the region, they were known enemies to the Skeleton Bandits, the Reavers, the Crab Raiders, and the United Cities Empire, which placed a bounty of 80,000 cats upon their leader Savant. Led by a Hiver male known as Preacher, the Preacher cult of the Stormgap Coast settled a cult village near the eastern shore, where their charismatic ruler taught his followers to worship their 2 moons, possibly believing Kenshi was a planet, and the 2 celestial objects in the sky were the planet's moons, even wielding heavy moon cleavers to honor their goddesses. Divided into Moon Guardian warriors and farmers, the Preacher cult was an isolationist faction with no real enemies among the other minor powers in the region, largely keeping to themselves and peacefully coexisting with the Grass Pirates gang to the west. Yet they also believed in blood sacrifices that called upon the rains to irrigate their crops, and so were known to capture and kill wayward travelers, earning the enmity of the United Cities Empire, the Holy Nation, and Shek Kingdom, which each placed a bounty of 15,000 cats upon the Preacher. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Drac the Bronze, Raj the Jar, Your Cheap Date, and Sir Elendil of Numenor. If you wish to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can gain early access to videos, vote on future content, or watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.